Namaste everyone, welcome to a Hindu Insiders special edition series, and in today's episode we are going to talk about Ramayana, which is in conjunction with the Indian Heritage Centre's Culture Fest 2020, and they have selected the theme Ramayana. Therefore, in conjunction with the Culture Fest, Hindu Youth Network under the auspices of Hindu Endowment Board has decided to curate this special edition for you. You may recall in our Hindu Insider series 1, we had a dedicated episode on Ramayana. We looked at the relevance and we discussed about the various characters. Obviously, when we talk about Ramayana, we just need lots of time. 1 hour wasn't enough for us, and we thought, hey, this is another great opportunity for us to kind of talk about Ramayana and focus on two important aspects of Ramayana, more of the teaching, the lessons that it offers. So we will be covering two themes in particular: ethics versus desires, and relationships in Ramayana. So these two themes we hope would also resonate a lot with you, and we hope that we are able to offer you some exciting insights that you can probably glean and assimilate and probably put into practice in your daily life. And without further ado, let me introduce who's joining me. As usual, I'm going to play the facilitator's role, and we have got three fantastic content providers: Vinodini, Loshini and Ruben, and we are all from the Hindu Youth Network. Hi guys, how are y'all?
Hi.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm good.
great. Okay, so we're going to talk about Ramayana today, and particularly, I just thought we should give a very brief introduction. Ramayana, which was authored by Valmiki, Sage Valmiki, who witnessed the event. And Ramayana comprises of 24,000 verses, and Ramayana actually comes in regional languages, but they aren't translations, but they are mere transcriptions, because those poets have induced the essence of creativity into the poetry, and therefore there are many types. Like in Tamil, we have the Kamba Ramayanam. In the Eastern Indian languages, we have the Krittivasas Ramayana. In Telugu we have the Ranganatha Ramayanamu, and even in Malayalam we have the Tunchattu Ramayanam. We have the Thiagara and many other forms of Ramayana, even the Javanese Ramayana. So in today's program, we're going to cover different types of Ramayana. As the content providers share their views and thoughts on the particular themes, they might draw references from the various Ramayana, but fret not, we'll definitely reference it, cite it, so that you don't get confused which Ramayana version we are referring to during our course of sharing. Okay, so let's start off with ethics versus desires. Guys, I often am in this position where you sometimes ethics, you have got a set of ethics, but your desires will suggest you to do something, and this can be as simple as wanting to have something sweet. Your ethics will tell you, hey, you know what, you need to moderately consume chocolates, but chocolates are so enticing. Your mind tells you that, hey, chocolates are not good for your health technically, milk chocolate in particular, because it's high in sugar and stuff like that. And so your ethics wise, okay, you need to observe moderate consumption, but sometimes we just tend to breach our ethics in this kind of small stuff, and we just indulge ourselves in chocolates. So I was just wondering, such instances, I think it's just not new to many of us, but I also understand it's also not new, and especially this has often happened in the course of Ramayana, the historical narrative featuring Rama, Lakshmana, and Sita, right? They often had this. They were caught in such fixated positions as well, where they had to deal with ethics, and they had to control their desires. They had to make a lot of more well-informed decisions. So let's get into the topic. I mean, come share with us. Probably can start off with Loshini. What's your view? How does ethics versus desires take its play in the context of Ramayana?
Right. In my opinion, well, ethics and desire are always seen as a contested ground as far as the Ramayana is concerned, because it's very interesting to see how some of the characters with an illustrious background tend to also succumb to their desires many a times. and we popularly speak about, when we talk about it, we talk about Ravana and so on. But of course, in the course of the Ramayana, there are other characters to be noted, and one is perhaps the story of Ahalya and the Rishi Gautama as well as Indra. And you observe how Indra, who's known as the king of the Devas, actually has a desire for Ahalya, and he takes the form of Gautama, and he decides to be romantic with her, much to the annoyance and anger of Rishi Gautama. And it does make ethics then very complex, because for Ahalya's case, she kind of sees that the man standing in front of her is her husband itself, because Indra's intention was to deceive and and be intimate with her. And in the case of um, Ahalya, she actually is not, what she did was definitely not ethical in that sense, because it's in a way an affair. But the problem here is she was not aware. So in that case, was the desire actually wrong in that sense, because she was seeing it as her husband, and in that sense, she felt that it was fine to be with her husband the way she would always be. So then it really brings up the idea of forgiveness as well. All right, like in the case of, if we were to take a step further and look at the case of Rama, Ravana, and Sita. Sita was very clear from start that this is not the person that she was going to have any kind of relationship with, because she was devoted to her husband, who is Rama. And in the case of Ravana, he doesn't do any impersonation, but the fact that you are desiring another man's wife, another man's love, actually deserves to be negatively sanctioned, is what is clearly recurring in every case of the Ramayana. Whether it's unknowingly done or knowingly done, you will have to face the consequences when something unethical is being done. So these kind of things resurface. And what is interesting in the case of Ravana is that if we were to look at the Kamba Ramayana, Ravana actually doesn't kind of hold Sita's hand and pull her and drag her along with him to Sri Lanka. They say that he actually takes the piece of land she's standing on and he lifts it up. So these things are very significant, because it's quite ironic, because even in the unethical, Ravana is actually doing something that doesn't intrude entirely into a space, although he is violating it. So this kind of paradoxes are very interesting to also note in the regional Ramayana, because it really then makes us question about whether it's even, when we think of something unethical, we always think it as 100% unethical. But even within that kind of a transgression, certain rules are actually observed, which is very interesting to note of, because I guess it really shows how none of the characters are black and white, wrong or right for that matter. Although Ravana's act was definitely wrong, the fact that he still wanted to be conscious about how he was even abducting Sita in the Kamba Ramayana really raises a lot of thoughts about how complex the idea of dharma or ethics can be, especially when desire peeps in. And another third thing that I wanted to also share is about the idea of Surpanaka as well, right? Because in certain versions of the Ramayana, it is said that Surpanaka actually comes into the picture and she tells about Ravana or about Sita. Until then, actually, Ravana's attention wasn't on Sita for that matter. So her unfulfilled desire actually becomes a kind of frustration in her, because she wanted to either get to go along with Rama or Lakshmana, and it didn't happen. And worse still, she was actually sanctioned for that as well by Lakshmana. So that unfulfilled desire of hers actually kind of manifests into a vengefulness, which induces desire into Ravana itself, because she kind of, in certain versions of the Ramayana, she herself comes and she tells Ravana that, hey, there's this beautiful wife that Rama has, and she's absolutely a person you should conquer and have for yourself. So it's interesting how Surpanaka, considered a female herself, actually becomes has a role to play in instigating Ravana to desire another man's wife, who is also a woman. So these are very interesting points to take note of when we are considering ethics and desire in the Ramayana, because more than it being a binary, it actually at one point of time converges, only to cause more complexities in how we understand it before getting judgmental about the characters. Yeah.
Fantastic point that you have brought up, and I really like the part that you say that Ravana, he knows that it's wrong, yet he does it. That's something that we all experience in our day-to-day life. We know that this is not good for us, yet we go for it. And in a way, I think we can also say that desires 10 times, sometimes, or rather most of the times, clouds our mind. It clouds our mind to a certain extent that we even forget ethics. Now, Vinodini, in your perspective, you may want to shed a little bit more light on the type of examples probably that we can also understand how Rama or Lakshmana or Sita, for that matter, have managed to strike a balance between desires and ethics.
Okay, ethics in according to me, most of the time is what you have to do, right? So it you can equate it for all intents and purpose with your duty. Whatever is your duty is your ethics. When your duty is something that you do not want to do, it's not desirable. That's when the clash happens. And actually, if you see a normal person who would have undergone the circumstances that Rama underwent, everybody would have given in to desires. But at every point, he performed his duty. At every point. But the point that really struck a chord with me was during the war when he's so upset with Ravana. He's really upset with Ravana. But still, when he was unarmed, he asked Ravana to go back and come. I don't think I would have ever done that. I would have seen, oh yeah, just get lost and go on to here. But at that time, it requires great what do you say, mental knowledge, great knowledge of dharma, and to be really like single-minded focus. What they say as arjavam, you need that in order to take a decision like that, even in such a when you're actually being served in a platter. Please perform adharma, but he actually went ahead and he did this with him. So that is something that really struck a chord with me, especially because we know how Rama was so grief-stricken when Sita was taken away from him, right? And also in many instances we can see Rama performed the role of a leader. Even in those times, he has been completely doing the leadership what he's supposed to do as a leader. Even when Vibhishana came and surrendered to him, and everybody said no, and Hanuman was the only one who said yes, right? But he took the opinion of everybody, and then he arrived at a decision. Actually, I can quote you a very nice verse that he says to Vibhishana. He says that Sugriva, you said that Vibhishana is a bad person, and Hanuman said that Vibhishana is a good person. I am not going to accept both of your arguments. He says this, I am going to consider one portion from what you have said and one portion from what Hanuman has said. He says, Dashodhyabi tasyataha satametat anarhitam. So I will tell you, I am going to accept Vibhishna even if he is a bad person. That's what he says. So I'm going to take a portion of both and then I'm going to go. So in all the instances, he has ensured that he has never wavered from his duty. And I think that is the greatest message that Ramayana holds for us. That when you are supposed to do something, you have to do it whether you like it or not. So I think that's the
Yes,
greatest
it's very
message.
interesting. The example that you cite, it just conveys the message that at least for in the case of Ramayana, the lead characters, if I may, they have always prioritized their dharma over their desires. Ethics have always been the top priority, but these are actually really tough decisions to make, right, Rupen? Maybe you may want to add on a little bit because these tough decisions come with a little bit of pain. It doesn't just come easily. So maybe Ruben, you want to share a little bit more on that?
Okay, so okay, I would say that yes, actually, like what Vinodini said, right? The Ramayana is actually is filled with these kind of scenarios where right was chosen over wrong, or the do's was chosen over the don'ts. I would like to emphasize more on like the why that happens and how it relates to us as normal individuals in our daily lives. We read about these really great personalities and how they're able to do it. But then the question is, why do we succumb to doing the wrong things at times or doing the things that we don't want to do? So I would just like to direct our attention to, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 36, where actually Arjuna is actually discussing with Krishna on the same topic as what we are talking about. He actually asks Krishna, "Oh Krishna, by what is one impelled to sinful acts even unwillingly, as if engaged by force. So he asked Krishna, what is it that makes people do wrong? Even though they actually don't want to do it. You see, so it's quite similar to what we're talking about right now. The ethics in terms of what is right, what is wrong, and why do we sometimes choose wrong over right when we know clearly the right is what we're supposed to do. So then Krishna answers to him saying that it's actually lust. It's actually lust that is, the all-devouring sinful enemy of the entire world. It's everyone's enemy. You see. So in my opinion, these great characters, most of them were actually devotees of Lord Ram. They shared different relationships, like Hanuman, and even for example, Lord Ram's brothers. They were all devotees of him. They all had love for him. And in the scriptures, it is said that if somebody takes to serving, the Lord, then the gunas or the modes of nature that control the individual slowly loses strength. Because the thing is that what makes us have so much lust in our heart is because of the mode of passion. We have mode of goodness, mode of passion, and mode of ignorance, right? So there are certain qualities that actually is infused into an individual because of these modes. So if somebody has a lot of mode of passion, then it's expected that their lust to be a bit hard to control. And therefore, even though the person really wants to do the right thing, like what Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, lust actually forces them to do the wrong thing. You see, so this is a very intricate matter. People don't always discuss this. When they see someone do something wrong, immediately like, oh, this guy is bad, this guy is evil. But actually, if you really go into the psychological argument of it, the person might not even have wanted to do it, but he or she just couldn't help himself. So I feel at the center of this is actually lust, and the question is, how do we actually overcome this? And the scriptures have said that actually when we take to spirituality or take to devotional service of the Lord, right, then we slowly transcend from the mode of passion to the mode of goodness. And then eventually we completely transcend all the three modes. And I feel that's the long-term solution in the sense of always wanting to do the right thing and being able to do the right thing. Yeah. That's all.
I think to summarize your points, like a lot, and I think you brought a few other thoughts as well. So I think one very important thought that you have offered here is that there's a need for us to use our intellect at such situations to different. I mean, our desires might suggest and propel us to perform certain things or behave certain way or make certain decisions, but the decisions should always stand guided by our ethics, our values and principles that we want to observe in our life. I think that's something that every individual needs to establish. And often and not this, the ethics should also correspond with the universal rules and regulations, and also stand in parallel with the state law as well. So that's very important in today's context, right? And that's how we often make decisions. And when you weigh, I think it's also very important the point that you suggested is to really analyze. Actually, in a way, you were trying to imply that we should think through why we need to make this decision. What's the rationale for making the decision? Sometimes we just look at the short-term gains, but we don't look at the long-term pain. So it's important to prioritize and look at the short-term pain that could result of our decisions, but bring in long-term, pleasant experiences. I think if everyone operates or starts adopting to this, modus operandi in our day-to-day life, trying to think through how we want to make decisions and using ethics as our foundation, then desires becomes much manageable. So we're not trying to say that desires are wrong. Desires are important, are equally important to have, but there's a very fine line between lust and desire. So when you lose the control of your desires, then it becomes lust. So that's very important, and that itself is an ethic. And that's, I think, a key lesson that Ramayana has offered. And within ethics itself, sometimes you might be stranded as well. And I think, a quick example that I could think of at this point in time, it would be the part where, Lakshmana, Rama goes after the deer, the golden deer, and then, he suddenly Lakshmana and Sita hear the call of help from Rama, and then and Sita, quickly instructs Lakshmana to go and see whether the brother needs help, or probably the brother's in trouble. Out of fear, she says that. But Lakshmana was contemplating, like, I shouldn't go because I need to be here to protect you, sister-in-law, who I see as my mother. but at the same time, you are asking me to give me an instruction to go. So that itself is another conundrum. You think about it, and that's within ethics, right? Your role as a brother-in-law and your role as a brother, you are like stranded between. So at that point in time, I think Lakshmana made a decision based on the understanding that that Sita would listen to his instruction as well by not leaving the hut at any point in time, at any cost, till he returns with Rama. So he goes with that agreement that he establishes, and then he goes out. So that's how you also make ethical decisions in that sense, right? Sometimes within ethics, you have to prioritize, not just between the desires. So thank you so much, guys. I think it was a short yet a very crisp discussion. I think our viewers will have definitely gleaned some important insights that they should be thinking about to lead their day-to-day lives. And I think Ramayana definitely indeed remains relevant. Next, we are going to talk about relationships in Ramayana. And for that, you're going to wait till next week. Take care. Okay, that's the first part. Very short, concise. Go. Now we are going to do relationships in Ramayana. Okay, you all can drink water if you need to.
Yeah.
Why are you laughing?
Was that long-winded? Sorry. Was that long?
No. I just initially, I mean, in order for Indian Heritage Center to share it on their page, they told us try not to keep it so religious. But you brought it.
Okay.
But that's okay. I mean, it's what was the worst that can happen? They don't share a lot. That's fine. It goes on our Facebook page, so it's okay. Maybe we can share clips of the shots of our discussion. So the next 15 minutes we'll look at relationships in Ramayana. Okay.
Okay.
Let's go up. Welcome to the second part of the Hindu Insider Special Edition. Purely. Of that. Sorry.
Okay. It's okay, we can always cut. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. Okay. Don't laugh. We can laugh now. Okay. No, that's more distracting. Okay. No, don't do that. Okay. Welcome to the second part of the Hindu Insider Special. Sorry. Welcome to the second part of the Hindu Insider Special Edition, specially curated in conjunction with the Indian Heritage Center's Culture Fest, and this is brought to you by the Hindu Youth Network, established under the auspices of Hindu Endowment Board. And today we have Vinodini, Loshni, Ruben with us, and we have been discussing, last week we discussed about Ramayana, and this week we are going to discuss about relationships in Ramayana. Last week we focused a lot more on ethics versus desires in Ramayana. This week we are going to focus on relationships in Ramayana. What are the key lessons that we can take away from the historical narrative Ramayana, which comprises 24,000 verses. And obviously, as shared in the previous week, there are many types of Ramayana. So as our content providers share, our speakers share their thoughts on the theme, they will definitely cite which version they are referring to, especially when quoting examples of certain incidents. Okay, with that, I think we can continue our discussion, guys. So today is going to be our relationships in Ramayana. I think relationships in general, at a very superficial level, it's quite simple, straightforward. But when you actually go really deep, you realize that relationships can be actually quite complex as well. And maybe let's start off with Ruben. In your view, which character demonstrates which characters in particular demonstrates a very complex relationship in the historical narrative?
Maybe I'll just briefly speak about two scenarios, very short description of two scenarios of two different relationships. First will be Lord Ram and Bharata, his brother, and how when Lord Ram was exiled to the forest for 14 years, and Bharata had to take ownership of Ayodhya, and how he actually took Lord Ram's slippers and placed it on his head. So the relationship between him and his brother, I would just like to emphasize how throughout the time when he was ruling Ayodhya, he always left Lord Ram's slippers on the throne while doing his duties. So I would like to draw a parallel comparison to our daily lives. Like even if you're married, we are householders. We should never look at ourselves as masters. Rather, we should look at ourselves as servants of our family members. Like, when we have a child, we are trying to serve the child to make the child a better person. We're trying to educate the child, we're trying to provide food and whatever basic necessities. And even between husband and wife, we should always see ourselves as I'm supposed to serve this person. Because the moment that service attitude comes in, then immediately one becomes humble. Because a lot of times, fights or any kind of friction happens when ego or arrogance or pride steps in. So we can learn from this particular relationship between Bharat and Lord Ram about humility and service, the mood of service. Sometimes we think that we should be very humble outside, but actually charity begins at home. We should try to even remain humble to those we are very intimate with, because sometimes when we become very close to somebody, we tend to like just be ourselves in a sense, and just slacken in terms of being respectful. Sometimes we tend to be, I mean, if you look at it, we tend to be more rude.
Take them for
Sorry?
granted. We tend to take them for
granted, yes, and also we tend to be
Yeah.
negligent when it comes to people we're very close to. So that's something we can check ourselves with, because Bharat and Lord Ram were extremely close, but we can still see how he has so much respect, and that was because of the service attitude. Something we have to remind ourselves. Second relationship would be Vibhishan and Lord Ram. I mean, in the sense, one can say they are completely different strangers, but how my focus would be on Vibhishan and actually his brother Lord Ravana, right? So when Ravana was doing something wrong, Vibhishan actually told him that you should stop doing this. But Ravana, he did not listen to him. But what did Vibhishan do was that he did his duty as a brother to advise his older brother on what he should be doing. But after he realized that he's doing the wrong thing, he was not blinded by a familiar relationship. He put what is right over who am I speaking to. So that's why it's very important, because many times even in movies you've seen how the villain, he's my brother, whatever it is, his family, so I'm going to stick by his side. So it's a very complicated scenario, but this teaches us that sometimes we have to choose what is right over family. It's a difficult decision, but sometimes it has to be made for the greater good. Yeah, that's all.
Right. I think the that you cited, Bharata and Rama, I think many, often and not, we tend to revere or admire or glorify the fraternal love between Lord Rama and Lakshmana. But actually, the fraternal love is also equally no less
Yes,
between Bharata and Lord Rama. And I think the example that you cited clearly shows that, because he has so much of respect for his brother, and even deep down his heart, he knows that he deserves Rama deserves to be the ruler, and even after understanding that the mother had played some manipulated King Dasharatha to make such decisions, he understood that he wasn't voluntarily chosen, and he's just there to cover him while Lord Rama is in exile. And that's very nice. And that shows fraternal love, because we tend to take advantage of our brothers. I think in today's context also, between siblings, we tend to take advantage of our relationships, especially those who are very close to us, because we know that they will be very forgiving towards us. We take advantage of them to just be how we want to be and not how we should be. That's a fine difference between the both. So so thanks a lot for that example, Ruben. Vinodini, in your perspective.
Yeah. So actually, I will also give the example of Ravana and Vibhishana, because we tend to concentrate on heroes when we read epics, So Ravana and Vibhishana is also a good example. But I also want to bring in Kumbhakarna here, because Kumbhakarna.
Sorry, just to maybe, Vinod, I think it might be useful to establish the role of Kumbhakarna, because I think many may know that Vibhishana is Ravana's brother, but they may not know that about Kumbhakarna. So maybe you might explain that role a bit more.
Sure. So Kumbhakarna is also one of Ravana's brothers, and he had this boon of he used to sleep for 6 months and be awake for 6 months. So that's just a tidbit. But when Ravana wakes him up in the middle of the sleep to tell him that, Kumbhakarna, I want you to fight against this Rama. This is what I did, and I want you to fight against him for this. So in the Yuddha Kanda of Valmiki Ramayana, chapter 63, it fully concentrates on Kumbhakarna's advice to Ravana, which of course Ravana doesn't pay heed. And even in one of the verses that he says, he mentions Vibhishana and tells him that, he did advise you, but you are not paying heed to it. But thereafter, Ravana gets angry and tells him, who are you to teach me? Whatever has happened has happened. At this point is when Kumbhakarna immediately tells him that you are my brother and I am still going to fight the war for you and I am going to make you happy. And I know very well that if Rama has to come and kill you, he has to kill me first. So he says that this is something that I feel it's not exactly right what he did, but I feel that affection is something that I feel such unconditional love must be appreciated in spite of knowing that I am going to fall in the well for somebody, but I am ready to do it for them. So I feel that kind of unconditional love is very rare and something that I really why I like Kumbhakarna a teeny tiny bit more than Vibhishna actually. Okay. One more example that I want to give in this is the friendship, because relationships also encompass the friendship also. The friendship between Guha and Rama, right? So in fact, Rama tells to everybody that Guha is almost as equal as me. Ramasya Atma Samasakha. He's my friend. He's like my own friend. Me, a form of me as a friend only. But Guha and Rama does not go by himself to Guha. These are all the rules of friendship that they have tried to tell us through the story. He does not go by himself to Guha, because it says that in times of need, you shouldn't approach a friend. A friend should understand and come to you. So that time Guha comes to Rama, and then he gives him, and then the story goes that he gives them a boat and everything, and then he goes. And also the Guha is the one who hugs Rama also. It's not the other way around, as if to tell him that I understand your plight and I do understand, I am here for you. Rama does not go by himself. So these rules of friendship, like what as a friend you should do, being others' friend, I think they have established that old proverb, friend in need is a friend indeed, is very well established here. And the last thing that I want to concentrate on is we all know that Sita was a very devoted wife to Rama. She was a highly devoted wife. She's one of the Pativratas. But the other way around, we don't know that Rama's devotion to Sita was so big. And in fact, there are about 2 chapters fully dedicated to him not asking Sita to please don't come with me to the forest. You cannot. I think he wanted her with him, obviously, but still he put her comfort above, and then he told her not to come. And in fully knowing well that Maricha, the deer that came, is a Rakshasa, fully knowing well, he did go and he did bring her just because she asked him. And after she's this is something that really touched me when I was going through the Ramayana for this. After she's abducted, I think that's one part where Rama becomes not himself. He goes completely crazy. He goes like fully crazy. I literally had tears reading the Valmiki's version of that. He goes to the trees and asks, "Did you see my Sita? Did you see her? You all see her somewhere. She wears this, she wears that, and all that." So at that time, Lakshmana is the one who steps in and makes him calm, and then he tells him that it's your duty to fight for her and putting her back, don't lose your cool, and all that. Okay, I just want to tell the last one small thing about the relationship between Sita and Lakshmana, which I like concentrating on all these underrated relationships. Where actually when Sita, what we discussed in the last week's session, where Lakshmana is forced to go and find Rama by Sita. I know that Sita actually said a lot of unparliamentary things in her anger. Of course, no, nothing against her. But she did tell a lot of unparliamentary things, and in that time, Lakshmana just said one thing. I do not want to reply to you, Mithila, the king of Mithila's princess she is. So Maithili, since you're like a deity to me, you are using words that are not, that it's not surprising. I know you're using this as because of your worry to Rama. So he actually went ahead and he forgot about the whole thing, and he was ready to do what she asked. And when he went also, it was only at that time when she said that if at all something happens, you are going to be the cause of my death. That's what she says in the end, which is after which he goes. Okay, if at all something had happened to Rama because of you not going, then I'm going to go. Still then he ignores all her harsh words, all her this one. So we say in our culture that the elder brother's wife is like a mother to us. So I think he followed that to the T. And even when Rama comes and Hanuman goes to Lanka and talks to Sita, she mentions in Sundarakanda 30th Sarga 60 verse to Lakshmana, he behaves towards Rama as his father and looks to me as his own mother. Pitruvat vartate Ramam matruvan mama samacharan. So this is the exact words that she says to Hanuman about it. So these are some relationships that really stuck a chord with me, which I really enjoyed reading, and was an emotional roller coaster as well.
No, absolutely, Vinodini. I think we all can't disagree with you. I think transcending from fraternal love to love in marital relationships, I think it's very important as well. And the relationship between Lakshmana and Sita, the mother and child relationship, is also beautiful. Though they are technically brother-in-law and sister-in-law, but it's beautiful to see that. And also the other part between the love between Rama and Sita. I mean, it's never ending, and it's so pure, and it's even at the toughest time during the trial. And this is not during the exile period; it's a post-exile period where Rama had to make some bold decision to also think of the words that Sita just threw out during at the time where she was trying to get convince Lakshmana to go find Rama, because of those very painful words that she uttered. He thought it's about important time to actually make her pay the price, and therefore she gets into the Agni Pariksha as well. But these are really tough decisions. But at the end of the day, even Sita accepts it and understands it, and I think that can only work if there's a strong chemistry between the couple. So there must have been a strong chemistry. That's why they are able to understand each other's decision, why they would have made such thing. I think in today's context also, between a husband and wife, we tend to just react without seeking to understand. And that's a very important, rule, I think, in relationship. And never embarrass. Don't have to scold aggressively, before others. I think that's also something that we tend to take advantage. Many of the young couples, we tend to use words very freely, and we sometimes also become very unconscious that we are in a particular environment, and that at the end of the day we're still couple, and yet others are watching us. We tend to forget, and we just behave like how we want to behave. And I think that's a very important lesson, because Rama and Sita, they always respected each other at all times, even though they may not be comfortable with certain things at certain point in time. So moving on to Loshini, now in your perspective, I mean, there, apart from fraternal love and love in marital relationship, is there another perspective that you can offer, or that suggests a different type of love or relationship bonding for that matter?
Right. I mean, in terms of this, like what Yuvan and Vino have pointed out, they are really very significant, because in terms of relationship, apart from fraternal love and from romantic love, which I'll be going into later, I just wanted to also raise an interesting idea that is often depicted, and that is the clash between the Devas and the Rakshasas or the Asuras. Because I remember Vinodini talking about Kumbhakarna. It's quite interesting how this tension that the Devas and the Asuras or the Rakshasas always have kind of also impacts their relationships with other entities later on. Even for the case of Kumbhakarna, it's a very interesting case actually, because So Kumbhakarna actually, like a typical Rakshasa Ashura, their whole idea is the Indrasana, right? The seat of Indra. So they will always have they do have a very tense relationship with the Devas as a result. And this is kind of also shown in the case of the Ramayana also, where, when Kumbhakarna is actually asking for a boon. So, this is a very important point of learning for us, because we always become very impulsive when we talk at times. So Kumbhakarna's story is actually a story of us, telling us to actually be very careful with our words, because sometimes what we wish for can totally go wrong. So for Kumbhakarna's case, what happens is, instead of asking for Indrasana, which is the seat of Indra, he actually asked for Nidrasana, which is the bed for sleeping. So, they actually say that, instead of asking for Nirdevatvam, which is like vanquishing the Deva, he actually asked for Nidravatvam, which is sleep. So, as a result, he goes into sleep. And, this is all because its idea is so fixated in defeating Indra and so on, that, even the way he talks and everything, it kind of gets messed up. And interestingly, it is also said in some versions that if Kumbhakarna is actually woken halfway through his sleep, he would actually die. His death will be inevitable. So in this case, so like what Vinodini was saying, every 6 months he'll be awake, and every 6 months he'll go to sleep. But because the war was going on between Rama and Ravana, what happens is they actually wake up Kumbhakarna even before the 6 months are over. So as a result, his death becomes inevitable. But what is interesting is really the idea of brotherhood and so on is really very different when we think about Kumbhakarna and Vibhishana. For Vibhishana, his devotion towards Rama actually transcends even that certain fraternal love that you would have expected him to have for Ravana, because to Vibhishana, Ravana was not traversing into the right path. So even if it was his brother, he felt that it was only right for him to actually pledge his devotion towards Rama by being on his side, even though he was not necessarily related to him as a brother. But he goes beyond that boundaries of a relationship and establishes the fact that his relationship with Rama need not be something necessarily familial innately, but the devotion he has is so much that even transcends the blood ties he has with Ravana. Whereas for the case of Kumbhakarna, in spite of his inevitable death, Kumbhakarna still stays by his brother's side and he fights, because Kumbhakarna is a really strong personality in terms of his valiance and so on. But in both cases, you can really see how the brotherhood and the relationship between that both brothers share between Ravana actually has a very different perspective. And when we talk about that, we definitely will have to talk about these two interesting characters in the Ramayana, who are actually Sugriva and Vali. So both of them are from the Vanara clan, and their story is very interesting because it's very. I personally feel that a lot of things in the Ramayana is actually something that is very relevant to our daily lives, and it's something that we can actually take note of, and there are many lessons to learn from. And if there's one about fraternal love, is actually about Sugriva and Vali. So just to cut the story short, in the case of Sugriva and Vali's story, Vali actually goes on a duel with Yavi, who is the son of Dundubi, a Rakshasa. So they actually have a duel, and it's in a cave. And Sugriva actually waits for his brother to emerge victorious. However, a long time passes, and he doesn't hear anything from Vali. And he actually takes it that his brother is perhaps not alive anymore. And because he was, so Vali said he would actually indicate that he's victorious with a sound. And when Sugriva doesn't hear it, he immediately takes it as he presumes that he is actually no longer around. And he goes back to Kishkinda, and he takes over the rule. And what happens in the process is that actually Vali, who comes out later on, actually he was exhausted after defeating the demon. So he actually takes a while to announce his victory. So when he comes out and when he goes back, he's shocked to see his brother on the throne. So he immediately takes it as he is trying to overthrow him, Vali the Great, and take over his throne. And this one small miscommunication that they both had actually results in such a big misunderstanding, to the extent that Sugriva gets kicked out, and that is when he actually meets Rama and Lakshmana, who are actually searching for Sita. And it's very interesting how in many instances there's always this question when talking about relationship. There's always this question about how many people tend to always ask, why was it in the case of Sugriva and Vali's duel, when they both were having a fight, because the tensions were so huge that they had to have a conclusion to it, and they decided to go on a duel. And for the case of Vali and Sugriva, there's always a question as to why Rama, who was not directly fighting with Vali, actually shot the arrow at Vali, and and defeated him. And there are many ways of actually looking at it. And one interesting perspective I got from one of my friends was actually this idea about how, when there's a stage, when there's a drama going on, when we think of all these happenings, it's like a divine play by God himself, if you were to see it in the bigger picture. So if you were to understand Rama as being the absolute truth, then what happens is you can kind of position him as a director. So when one of the actors is actually not doing their role as it is supposed to be, for Vali's case, he was being impulsive. He didn't think through about why his younger brother would actually do that, and he was immediately trying to become what he wouldn't have been if he had been a bit more calm. So when the actor is actually not doing his role as expected, the director can't just immediately jump into the foreground and tell that you're not doing your job. So what he does is he has to subtly indicate that this actor is actually not doing what is expected of them. And so that is exactly what Rama did. And that's one way of actually looking at it, perhaps, when we are considering this kind of relationships in relation to ethics, or in relation to what is dharmic when you consider about a relationship. And speaking of Rama, there's also another when we talk about Rama and Sita, there's often another pair that is not spoken much about, and that is actually Lakshmana and his wife Urmila. So in the case of Lakshmana, his character in the story he's someone who is very firm with things. If we were to notice, just like his brother, he's very clear about rules, and he's very particular about responsibilities, because we are talking about a man who was willing to actually follow Rama and Sita, whom he regarded as his parents, to the forest, even though he was actually not being exiled. And in some folklore about Lakshmana, they said that once Sugriva actually won the duel and was crowned as king, he actually had a feast, and he was enjoying with all the Vanaras. And what happened in the process is the celebrations were going on for too long. And Lakshmana is one person who's very particular about the sense of duty. And what he does is, in some versions, it's mentioned that he actually, in some of the folklores, mentioned that he actually gets so annoyed with their irresponsibility by continuing the celebration and not helping out Rama as they have promised, that he actually strungs his bow once, bang, like that. And what happens is, immediately the Vanaras actually get alerted that, okay, we are not doing we are supposed to do our responsibility, and we are not actually keeping up to the promise we made to Rama in terms of having the battle with Ravana. So Lakshmana is that particular about duty and responsibility. And in terms of looking at his wife, she is in no way lesser, because she is pretty much compatible with Lakshmana in this regard. And why I say this is because in the case of Urmila, she doesn't follow Lakshmana to the forest during the exile. But what is interesting is that Lakshmana always keeps vigil throughout when his brother and sister-in-law are asleep. And in that process, what happens is he doesn't sleep for a long time, and it is said that actually Urmila takes his sleep in exchange for him to stay awake for the 14 years. And that is how strong their love is. In today's time, we always complain that, between husband and wife, there's always this give and take thing that has to go on. And sometimes people tend to be so transactional about it in the current times, where they say that you must do an equal amount of what I'm doing for you. But for Lakshmana and Urmila's case, there is really, you can't see that transaction in that sense, because it's just beyond. She was willing to go into a slumber for 14 years when she could have actually not even thought of doing so. And the kind of understanding they both had for each other, even though they were not physically together, really shows the strong amount of unconditional love Lakshmana and Urmila had for each other, which is something that many couples of today have to learn from, because we always think of the expectations and so on. Lakshmana and Urmila didn't have such a thing. So from this kind of relationships, we can really see how in Ramayana, there are some relationships that are ambivalent, some relationships that are unconditional, and some relationships that are so sophisticated that we could go on and on talking about it. But that is really the beauty of Ramayana, if we were to see it from this point of view. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think I really love the examples that you've quoted. I think what's important is that you also covered other characters that are not much spoken about, especially the Sugriva and the Vali, the relationship between them. I thought that was also quite significant, and it also alluded to our earlier point on the worth of fraternal love and the structure of how certain how we should be behaving. And I think you also did mention towards the end, citing Lakshmana and Urmila, their relationship as well. I think that's also equally fantastic. I think these are really good examples that would have definitely provoked much thoughts. Now, Ruben, to kind of sum up our discussion, earlier, when he was, when Loshini was sharing about Sugriva and Vali, I kind of caught your expression. You went you went like that. I'm not too sure what was it for, but it'll be great. As it looks like you really enjoyed it thoroughly. So come share with us another example or another perspective that you think is worth for our viewers to kind of also take away when as they are reading Ramayana. And we also totally understand that we have not summarized Ramayana in today's discussion and even last week's discussion, because our purpose here is to intrigue you. Go pick up the book and read it. Right. So Ruben, come. Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll just do it this way. I'll just share one. It's a very famous example, Lord Ram and Hanuman. I mean, who doesn't know them? I mean, we didn't cover them because I'm pretty sure everybody knows them. But I would just like to bring one example of the beauty of the relationship, and then we can sum it up. So, when it came to Hanuman, Hanuman is known as one of the most powerful personalities in Ramayana itself, and that's why when people know him for his strength, for his valor, and it is actually mentioned in the Ramayana when actually Hanuman goes over to convey the message of Lord Ram to Mother Sita, right? He actually had the power. He actually had the power to single-handedly destroy everyone, including Ravana. You see, so that's very interesting for me. I was actually taken aback. I thought that, okay, logically speaking, when it comes to war, you need a plan, you need strategy, this number of soldiers and stuff. But he was so powerful that he could single-handedly defeat Ravana. In fact, but the thing is, he has so much of devotion for Lord Ram that he didn't think about his glory. He was thinking that I want my Lord Ram to have the glory of defeating Ravana. So he held back and he went back. And this actually links back to the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna says that strength devoid of passion, is me. So Lord Hanuman was very strong, but that strength was devoid of passion. Passion meaning the passion to gain that glory for himself. So sometimes when someone is very rich or very powerful, they tend to want that glory for themselves, you see. So it's something that we can learn in terms of Hanuman, how he was always humble despite being so opulent. He was intelligent, he was strong, but how he was so contained. He was not bewildered by it. He didn't want to show people that, hey, look, I'm so strong, So that's the thing. And to sum it all up, I feel right, that Ramayana is actually it's a guidebook in one sense of how to love people. Actually, when we say I love you to somebody, right? Sometimes we don't really know what love means. I'm talking about myself. Okay? I'm not saying everybody else. I'm talking about myself here. Because love actually has so many facets, Love actually means to serve somebody. So how do you serve someone? There's so many examples here in mind now. And love also means sacrifice. Like Kumbhakarna, he knew that what his brother is doing wrong. And he can choose to say, oh, you're doing wrong, I'm not going to be by your side. But he chose to sacrifice his life. He chose to sacrifice ethics so that he can serve his brother. So there are all these different facets of love that you can learn. And I feel that it's important to understand what love is, because love is the pivotal center of any relationship. When we say we have a relationship with somebody, whether it's a friend or whether family or parent or brother or sister, love is at the core center of it all. So I feel if you read Ramayana and if you understand all these practical examples, right, it will really, really improve our relationships in our life. It will make it more genuine. It will make it more. It will strengthen our relationships, and it will make it more long-lasting. So I would say, yeah. In other words, it really teaches us how to love and to be loved. Yeah.
Karthik,
Absolutely, Ruben. I think you got a fantastic conclusion. It's great. I think, in a nutshell, I think there's different dimensions to love, and Ramayana it reveals this love in different forms.
Right.
Not just for the heroes, but even for the for the characters that have been vilified. I think that's very beautiful explanation. So thank you so much for sharing those examples. And I think with that, we can conclude this discussion. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. Unfortunately, Vinodini had another prior appointment, so she had to rush off. So she couldn't stay on till the end of the program. But nevertheless, we would like to thank all viewers for joining us in this discussion. Please do share this episode with your family and friends who may have interest in Ramayana, who may want to know a little bit more on Ramayana. Indian Heritage Center has organized lots of events, so do follow their page, watch their various capsules as well. Some of the incidents and examples that we have shared are indeed presented in a dance form for you, so do go and catch them as well and get to know a little bit more about Ramayana characters. I think what's very important is to take everything in different perspectives and to kind of develop this perspective taking quality in us. I think when we do that, we will definitely be able to relate a lot more with Ramayana instead of trying and say, oh, that's many years ago kind of story. Why should I, think about it? No, actually, there's a lot of relevance. It's the key teachings that we need to assimilate, and that's the biggest challenge that I think in today's world many of us tend to stumble because we are so indulged in our daily transactions. We have no time. But I think it's very important to do some reflections. I think as you reflect, as you read, please do reflect on the characters. I think that allows one to also look within us and improve our qualities. And on that note, we wish you a very good weekend and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yay, we did it.
Oh,
We did it. No, don't worry. That's all private.
Oh, okay, okay. Are we like really gonna?
That's what happens. The entire thing goes off. So thank you guys. Thank you so much. Roshini, yeah. I mean, don't worry about going all the time. I mean, it's just that there were lots of examples. Yeah, but thank God, I have to thank the universe for this because if I had given Roshini the chance to speak first, I don't think Vinodini would have been given something that made me, to just get to speak first.
I just want to say I'm sorry, really. I feel so bad because if not for me, Vinodini would have been here till the end. I'm so sorry.
For sure, but it's okay. Don't worry. I don't want to lie and say, oh yes, it's not because of you. I mean, we started the way, that's fine. But it's okay. I'm glad that we still had a very good discussion. I mean, the quality matters, so ignore the negative part. Okay, guys, have a good weekend. Rest well. Ruben, you look very tired, so go and get some rest. Roshini, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, most welcome.
Again, I'll see you all next week. Sunday, right? The meeting. Yeah, it's with Miss Madhu. I'm not going to talk at all. So Miss Madhu wants to talk to you all. Basically, she just wants to meet all the new people before the meeting. We have they're going to Tejas and myself, we are going to present about Hindu Youth Network to the board members on the 16th of September. But she doesn't know most of you all, right? I mean, she won't ask lah. She already met us, but that's why she needs to know the members. So she wants to meet and chat and just get to know you all to make sure that we have recruited safe and sound people. So anyway, so see you next week. Ask a lot of questions that you have. You can ask about the Hindu Animal Board, Roshini. How come some things have happened in a certain way? I'm sure she will answer you.
Roshini, go. Okay.
Sorry?
Regarding what? Like in the Hindu Endowments Board? Like,
I don't know, anything that you are you feel very pressed about, or any pressing issues, you can just raise it, share it. Worst come to worst, just say sorry. I don't think this is the right time for me to answer you. But just ask any questions. I think that will keep the discussion going. There's something else that she can talk about. She's about 15 to half an hour to kill with us. There's really nothing on that. I've not prepared any agenda or talking points for her. She has to come with her own talking points if she wants to talk for 30 minutes. So I think pretty much we do some questions. So ask any questions that you feel like asking at HEB. How else you think HYN can work on and what's lacking? Just share your thoughts. I think she will ask you all for your views on how you guys are. You can provide a very straightforward assessment about how terrible leader I am or something like that. That's fine. You can go ahead. Be honest. Don't have to be. Don't have to moderate your answers. I mean, I think what she wants is a very genuine, honest feedback. And also in terms of commitment wise, I think she would. She did share with me that she will talk about the retreat thing, and because she wants to personally work with the retreat team and lead it, because she wants Tejas and us to look at this social media thing and all the other projects. So she says she wants to take that, but I don't know. I don't think she has the time and the bandwidth. She's involved in so many things. So I don't know. So I leave it. I leave it to her and you all.
Okay. All right. Catch you.
Sorry, I very long never talked to you, so I talk a lot today. Okay, bye bye. Take care.
Okay, bye. Bye.